I'm sitting here watching you talk and watching your expressions and the way you smile and your eyes. And I'm thinking about when you write about characters and the physicality of the characters. Is there a different process when you're thinking about, as opposed to thoughts and physical movements?
Well, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, I see the characters and they're moving, and it's like a movie. It's just like a movie's going on right there in my head. I see them, I see their gestures, I see what they're doing physically, I picture them vividly, and I've even mumble out loud as I'm writing, as they say the lines of dialogue to each other. And it's really effortless for me to do it that way, because that's the way I see it. What would you say?
I heard an actor say to me that he doesn't have stage fright, he has reality fright. And I think that's a description of a lot of writers. We were talking about this before we walked on tonight, that the idea that we're actually doing this right here is kind of nuts. Because what we do is essentially we stay alone in a room, you for most of the day, me for half of the day. We live in this, we inhabit this imaginary world, we do everything we can to get it down on paper, and if we're fortunate enough to be successful at it, we're asked to go out into this fearsome real world that I don't feel all that comfortable in and talk about it. And so the world that she's describing, that she sees, is far more comfortable to me than this one. So it doesn't require a great deal of conscious effort to enter it. It isn't like painting. It's like painting, but the brush is attached to your hand, if that makes any sense. Do we have a question? Over here.
At the beginning of the conversation, you guys were talking about how many writers find themselves in a situation where they're pandering to somebody that they've never met and trying to craft a book that ultimately doesn't become something that they would have written themselves, but they're trying to appeal to somebody. But it sounds like you embrace Facebook a lot, and you get a lot of comments, whether they're warranted or whether you've asked for them or not, and maybe praise and thoughts that people have. I'm wondering if you ever had a fear that while trying to write to your audience, you almost would pander to them because you know what they want, and you're almost not writing from what you would have originally written if you almost lived in a vacuum and didn't have that instant feedback.
I think you addressed a lot of that.
There's no consensus in my audience about what the books mean or which are the best books. And that helps a lot with that. There are people that have only read the 2 novels I did about Jesus Christ and the more recent books, and there are other people that read the vampire novels and won't read those new books. They just absolutely won't. So all that helps me to keep perspective that there are all these different kind of camps in that audience. And there are if I go on Amazon and want to read the reviews, which I don't recommend an author do, but if I do, I can find people saying, this is the only good book she ever wrote, all the rest is garbage. Or The Vampire Lestat was the beginning of the end for her.
But let's draw a line between social media and bloggeria, which is like a whole nother thing, right? Because there's social media where there's often a general respect between the people who are interacting with another, on your page at least. But then there are blogs where people under assumed names write the most attention-seeking, inflammatory stuff that they possibly can. And if a writer goes on there and reads that, they're looking for an excuse not to write. I'm just speaking from my own experience.
Right, yeah.
When I go to look at that stuff, I'm looking to have my worst suspicions about myself confirmed so that I can go to the gym earlier and think about other things. And so, but there's a difference between what you're doing and what a lot of the internet offers you if you just start doing searches of your work, which I don't recommend to anyone.
You can't write for your audience, no matter how much you love them.
Right.
You can't. You have to. What my audience wants of me is that I give them what I want to do. That's really what they want. They want me to put my heart and soul into a new book and surprise them.
Right.
That's really what they want. They're counting on me to do that. And there are always going to be people that are going to be very angry with whatever I do. That's the normal process when I publish a book, is that people say, well, this is not what we wanted. We wanted Interview with the Vampire, or we can't stand the vampires, we wanted the witches, or we wanted another Christian book, or we wanted, or when are you going to do something like Cry to Heaven and Feast of All Saints, your novels that didn't have supernatural characters, that's the only good stuff you ever did. Well, so I'm used to that. I'm used to that outcry, that first outcry, and then it takes a little while for that book to find its audience. A little while for it to get out there and people begin to get it. So I have to remind myself of those things. And I have to steel myself against that, and I have to do the book that I really believe in right now, the book that obsesses me, and the book that won't leave me alone. Like right now, I'm writing a completely new novel about these immortals that came to the earth in the time of Atlantis and have survived into the present time. I'm doing this just because I want to do it. I've always wanted to write about ancient Atlantis, the legend of Atlantis, my take on the city, what it was, why it was destroyed, and I want to deal with immortals that don't have to kill people every day. So I'm really having fun doing this book, but I expect a lot of people to say, why the hell did you write that?
When you're developing a character and you get into them so much, do you ever have them answer you back? Or do you get into dialogues with them to the point where they have their own say in things as well?
Well,
You're right.
I don't know if they answer me back, but they certainly take on a life of their own. That cliche is really true.
It is true.
And they come to life in weird ways. I mean, like, I never intended Lestat to be a character. Louis, the narrator of Interview with the Vampire, was the character. I didn't care about Lestat. He was just a bad guy. He suddenly took over the book. And when I came back to write the second book about the same set of characters, he was the one who was totally taking over my mind. So I wouldn't say he argued with me, but I'd say he obsessed me. And he took on a life that I couldn't totally rationally account for. In my novel, Christ the Lord, The Road to Cana, there was a character living in Nazareth, this totally fictional character that's a friend of Jesus in Nazareth. His name is Jason. He does the same thing in that novel in a way. He springs to life and begins to have long conversations with Jesus in the novel. And Jason's the most lively, wonderful, fun character in the book to write, and he was completely unplanned. He's just this sort of intellectual who lives down the street in Nazareth, who was in a scene and was kicked out, and has traveled the world but come back to be in his own village with his grandfather's fig trees. But that character just, and things like that, that's some of the most wonderful stuff about writing, is when those characters come to life and when they take over like that. Lestat lives with me all the time. I go into a hotel and I think, boy, Lestat would really like this, Like, look at this lobby, look at this flower arrangement, he would really love this. Clothes, I see clothes in an ad and think, oh yeah, that's what he would be wearing right now. But I've not had that experience with every character I've written about, but that's about as far as it goes with me. They don't really argue with you. They just become part of you, I think.
I think the character that I'm most afraid to write is the one I can't face right away, and so I work my way around to them. That's why I've had those experiences like you described, of these characters feel like accidents. They're unplanned. I have them walk up to just give the piece of the mystery that's going to set the hero off on his quest, and suddenly I realize there's way more juice to that guy. He can't walk away so quickly. And then I realize that there's usually something going on in that character that really troubles me very deeply. In that case, I'm writing a book set in New Orleans again, and I introduce this character who views this murder, but what I realize is that this character, when we first meet him, hates New Orleans and has contempt for it, and he needed to come to love New Orleans, which is sort of the reason that I'm writing this book. So he stuck around, but if I had outlined that, I would have shut myself down. It's almost like describing what your book is about in advance, as opposed to saying, I'm going to write a story in which the vampire tells his story, as opposed to saying, I will now sit down and write a novel about immortality, philosophy, religion, the quest for meaning in life. You can't approach it that way, or at least I can't, because it's just, it causes lock hands.
Right.
On this side.
Has any directors tried to approach you about another movie about one of your books recently?
Well, we are always in talks with a number of people. There is a constant interest, and I have very, very good agents, and we are in talks. And right now things look very good on several of the books, but it's too early to really announce anything. But I love film with my whole heart and soul, and I want all my books to be made into films. And I've always wanted that. And I'm very open to any suggestions that are coming from anyone. I hope we'll have some exciting news on a number of my books in 2011. And I hope on yours too.
I hope.
Yeah.
To speak from my end, which wasn't the question, but I'm up here. So Mysteries have become harder to sell to Hollywood because what you can do on television now with a crime drama is so much more expansive. The atmosphere is so much more permissive in terms of content. That when you go out with mysteries like mine for a movie sale, which is what I would like to see, they say to you, well, why can't this be a Law and Order episode? Or why can't this be on CSI? And the answer is because I don't write for either of those shows. But so the climate for the type of books that I've written has changed, but I don't think, I think cable is a wonderful venue for a lot of adaptations like we saw with Pillars of the Earth and other things that are going on, much more than it was just say 10 or 15 years ago when you started, before you started writing.
Yeah.